Joanne, are you using any slide presentation or anything? Or are you just going to be talking?
Just talking.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, President Don. So some of you might have read the clip on Joanne Dickenson DePuy. I had the great fortune, good luck, to have met Joanne Dickenson family when I was 12, when we moved to Monticello Park. So an interesting thing, besides what Joanne's going to talk about the judgment of Paris, she was also integral in bringing tennis to Napa Valley in a time when Napa really had no tennis courts. So at her lot in Monticello Park, the Dickinsons had one lot, and then across the Dickinsons on the other side was Frank Dunlap, and then the house in the middle was John M. and his family. So those three families took pieces of the land from each one and had built a tennis court. And then she began a relationship with a world-famous tennis coach named Tom Stowe, who ultimately became the tennis pro at Silverado. He was the tennis coach from UC Berkeley Cal, and he also was an instructor at Claremont of the Berkeley Tennis Club. So besides the judgment in Paris, Joanne is also very much responsible for bringing tennis to Napa, and she started an organization called Napa Valley Tennis Association, which went on and built the courts, which are public courts, over there by Vintage High School, but that was also one of her efforts of the many wonderful things that she's done. So that's just my little side note. So Joanne was from Southern California. She was raised in Altadena, and then she went to the University of California. That's where she met her husband, Howard Dickinson, this young man's father, and that young man's grandfather. And then after graduating from Cal in 1949 with a degree in International Studies, her and her husband, Howard Dickinson, they moved to Napa, and that's where Howard started the law firm Dickinson, Peatman, and Fogarty. And so I'll let Joanne tell her very remarkable story, but she is truly the heart and soul of the whole process of the judgment in Paris, which changed Napa Valley forever. So give it up to my favorite young lady, Joanne Dickenson DePuy, born in 1927. Do the math.
Sure. Oh.
Here, I got it.
I think is it on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, is that right?
That's right.
Sounds good. I think I'm going to start this by what I said to myself when I woke up on my 95th birthday. I said, 95 and still alive? I woke up on my 96 and I said, 96, not in a fix. On my 97th, 97 on my way to heaven. On my 98th, 98, heaven can wait. On my 99th, still drinking wine. That's the end of my speech. Thank you, Gary. I'd like to give I'm going to be reading this. I'd like to give just a little background to my part in the Paris Station. I write in the preface to my rest of the story, which is this. The difference between the truth and fiction is sometimes in the eye of the beholder. History is often rewritten by those far removed. The story of the 1976 Paris station was tossed about for 32 years, culminating in the release of the film Bottle Shock. And someone in this room is friends of the film Bottle Shock. The film was a Hollywood version of the truth. Here is the rest of the story from someone who was involved. When I came to Napa Valley in the 1950s, one had to go through Napa to get up Valley. Things were simpler. There was no Queen of the Valley Hospital, there was no Lincoln Avenue Bridge, and the population in Napa was approaching 9,000. No one called us the Napa Valley. It was Napa, Yountville, St. Helena, and Calistoga. In September of '73, I called on Louis Martini, who was president of the Napa County Vendors Association. I told him about my interest in starting an international wine touring business led by members of the Vintners Association. The groups would tour other wine regions of the world, inviting the grape growers and vendors to return to visit the Napa Valley. Louis was very keen on the idea and asked me to be the guest speaker at the new Vintners Association, at the next Vintners Association meeting where there was unanimous support. Louis suggested I contact Andre Chelachev to lead my tours as he had recently retired from Beaulieu. Subsequently, I had a memorable meeting with Andre and his wife Dorothy that concluded with Andre saying, I cannot lead your tours right now, but perhaps Lee Stewart or Sue Rain would, as he has just retired. Within 2 months, Lee Stewart was leading a wine tour to Argentina. These tours were open to the public. In 1975, I ran into Andre pushing a food cart at Valerga's, which some of you may remember. I asked him when he would be ready to lead a tour. He said, I am ready. I was so thrilled. I said, when I leave this market, may I call Louis and tell him that we are on? Andre said, yes. Dorothy will kill me. Later, Dorothy told me that he said to her, how could you have let me do that? Andre said that it would be a technical tour for members of the wine industry only. In the fall of '75, Patricia Gallagher from the Académie de Vin in Paris contacted me. I met with her when she came to the Napa Valley for the first time. She told me that Stephen Spurrier, a 33-year-old English fellow, owner of the Académie de Vin, was planning a bicentennial tasting in Paris of American and French wines. Most of the French had never tasted good or great wines from California, and he thought that it would be an interesting PR event for the Académie de Vin. I told Patricia several small wineries in Napa that she was unfamiliar with. After her visit, I was invited as a guest of the French government tourist office to tour the wine areas of France. Claude Ruas, whom some of you may remember, the visionary and managing partner behind the Auberge du Soleil and Piatti's, had agreed to lead a wine gourmet tour of France for me in '76. So I flew to Paris with he and his wife artists so that I could put both tours together while I was visiting France. Andre introduced me by mail to Pierre Brigeau, the head of the Appellation Contrôlée of France. Ardith volunteered to go with me to visit Brigeau as she understood French. Don't let him know I understand, she said. I really can't speak it. When I met Ardith on the Champs-Élysées to go to the meeting, she was carrying 2 elegant shopping bags. There was no place to ditch them, so we went in with them. Me carrying the obligatory black briefcase and in a business suit, Ardith looking every inch the beautiful fashion model that she was, carrying her little Givenchy bags. Monsieur Brichot's assistant, a mean-spirited, American-hating, middle-aged woman, introduced us to him with a sneer and stood by to translate. Monsieur Brichot was delighted and said yes to everything I asked him regarding arrangements for the Chelachef tour. Among other requests I asked was that we have simple picnics at the wineries, not elaborate lunches. Pique-niques, he said, what is that? He was aghast. He said, of course the vintners could tour the wineries and ask any technical questions that they wished of the owners. Monsieur Brichot said he would make the appointment schedule at Andre's request. Suddenly the associate blurted out in French in a loud voice, which he thought we could not understand. Why are you telling these frivolous American women our secrets? How dare you let them visit all the wineries they ask? Look, they are carrying shopping bags. This is just a lark for them. They are not important and the Americans will steal our secrets. He hush-hushed her, gave Arleth and I 2 kisses on each cheek, and we were off. Outside I said, what in the world did she say? And Arleth told me. We laughed all the way down to the Arc de Triomphe. Pierre Brichot definitely was in our camp. Stephen Spurrier and his wife Bella came to the valley in April of '76. The Chelachef tour of France was scheduled to leave May 6th. I took them to Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, Chateau Manolina, and other small wineries. Although I called ahead to make appointments and advised that he was having a tasting in Paris honoring the bicentennial, he received no more attention than any other clients. He tasted the best and purchased at full retail. We had a delightful day. A few days later he called me, help Joanne, I cannot carry all of the wine I brought with me to Paris. Can you carry 3 cases when you come in May? Of course I would be glad to, said I, and then immediately called my TWA contact, Earl Hankin, who was so enamored with his wine bridge, as he dubbed it, from US to France and back, that he said TWA would provide a special escort to go with us to Boston and hand carry the wine to the connecting flight. The 3 cases were delivered to my home. I gave a list of the wines to Andre for his information. He said, this young man has a very good palate. When I was on a wine tour that day, my son Chuck, with some of his Cal buddies, came up to the valley for a wine tasting afternoon. When I returned home, he said, hey Mom, you've got some great wine there. My heart sank. I said to Chuck, you and your friends, you didn't drink any of it. He didn't. Well-trained fellow that he was. When I arrived at Gate D at the airport on departure day for the tour, I was confirming details with TWA, and they said, we're so sorry, there's been an emergency. We cannot send a rep with you to carry the wines from one plane to another. Just then, a group started arriving. Louis Martini at 6'4", Rene DeRosa at 6'3", Norb Marisu, Husky 6 feet, and Andy Beckstoffer. Earl Hankin, the TWA rep said, can you ask 3 of those guys to each carry 1 case? I knew there was no Martini, no Marisu, no Beckstoffer wines. Could I ask one vintner to carry another vintner's wine to Paris for a tasting? No, I can't do that, I said, and went about receiving the group as they arrived. Fielding the problems, Earl made other arrangements for TWA to carry the wine. When we arrived at the Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport, I had one eye out for my luggage being hiccuped out of the long plastic sausage tube, and one looking for Stephen, who was to meet me and take the wine. I spotted Stephen Spurrier holding a baggage cart, splendid in his white suit, smiling and greeting just as I smelled the wine and saw one of the cases drenched in red wine. I was aghast, but Stephen was undismayed. The other 2 cases were fine, and off he went. He told me that only one bottle had been broken. I was afraid to ask which one. 10 years later at the SF Vintners Club repeat tasting, I summoned the courage. Stephen said there was no problem as he had 2 bottles of everything, and the Freemark Abbey, which had been broken, the second bottle was in the tasting. The Chelachep group went on its merry way tasting 250 wines, which were recorded by Jim Barrett. On May 24th, we were nearing the end of the tour. The Bordeaux Vintners Association was holding a lunch for us at Chateau Lascombe with about 52 French vintners present. When we were having an aperitif in the Great Hall, a member of the staff at Chateau Lascombe came to me and asked if I would get Monsieur Berry to the office for a telephone call. I was very apprehensive because I knew that only Pierre Brichot, my ground operator, Jean-Claude Murat, Andre, and I had the daily list of wineries. How had Jim been tracked to this spot? When we arrived at the small office, Jim had to kneel down on one knee as the telephone was on a low table and there was no chair. I was afraid one of his 5 children had been hurt and watched him answer the call and say, "Not bad for a kid from the sticks," and give me the thumbs up. I then left and mingled with the crowd. I went back to the crowded room and Jim sidled up to me and whispered. The phone call was Time magazine telling me that we had just won Stephen's blind tasting of Chardonnay, and Warren Winiarski Staggery Wine Cellars had won for the Cabernet. He said, "Don't breathe a word to our hosts." Soon we all knew and were elated but quiet. At the lunch, I was seated to the right of our host, Alexis Lachine, and Andre was seated to his left. I apologized for not speaking French, and he said, "That is not a problem, my dear, we all speak English." He continued in this vein while making his welcoming talk to the group. Speaking for the Bordeaux vintners, he told us we were trying hard and someday would make good wine. He said the French were happy to share their knowledge with us in our pursuit. We were all quite smug and quite silent and accepted their gracious hospitality. After Andre had thanked them and after the 3-hour lunch, we boarded the bus, which rolled down a flag line drive, turned the corner, and all hell broke loose. Everyone whooped and hollered and hugged Andre and Jim. Andre had been mentored both Jim and Mike Perkins and Warren Winiarski, not Jim. Jim wasn't the winemaker. And that was that reason. When we got to the hotel, I wanted to call Warren and Barbara, but I realized it was 3 a.m. in Napa. I didn't want to awaken them, a decision I've always regretted. I had to leave the group a day early as my daughter was graduating from Wellesley College. When I got to the airport, I saw the French newspaper headlines screaming, or so it appeared to me, Californians win wine tasting. It was a rare moment of time 50 years ago. In 2008, the movie Bottle Shock premiered outdoors at Chateau Montelena in Calistoga. Bo Barrett greeted the group and was on the stage just before the film began to welcome us. He finished his remarks and said, just before he jumped off the stage, incidentally, none of this shit really happened. The film opened with, "This is based on a true story." After the film played, I was walking out with Jim Barrett and said to him, "The only thing true about that story is your name is Jim Barrett, you own Chateau Montelena, and you have a son named Bo." Jim laughed and said, "Joanne, I want you to tell the rest of the story," which I did several years later. And this is the rest of the story. Thank you. Any questions?
Joanne, didn't you mention to me that there's a play?
Pardon?
There's a play or a musical opera.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you for reminding me of that. Forgotten what his name is working on an opera called The Paris Tasting. If you haven't heard that, it's going to be previewed on July 18th. And it's a full opera called The Paris Tasting.
And it's going to be at Charles Crew, I think.
But
Charles Crew?
it's going to be premiered at Charles Crew. And Napa Valley Festival, I forgot what's being called, is sponsoring it also.
John, I was going to ask, can you enlighten us, do you know, there was a follow-up tasting using the same wines 10 years after that, is that right?
Yes, was that, you mean in San Francisco?
Yes.
Yeah, there was.
Do you recall the results of that?
You know, I have them somewhere. I was there, but I don't recall.
I believe it
I can
wasn't the
seem to
same
think
Napa
that the
Valley
same-
wines, but
I
Napa
seem
Valley
to-
wines still did very well.
Pardon?
Napa Valley wines, my understanding, still did very well.
I think they
Different
even
houses.
won. I think yes, I think so. Sorry, I don't remember
That's all right.
that.
Joanne, I heard a story that your tour group was
Michaela?
asked, your tour group to get the wine into France couldn't be done, that everybody had to carry 2 bottles.
Could you do that in the microphone?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I heard a story that to get the wines for the original tasting into Paris, everybody on the tour had to carry 2 bottles.
That is not true.
That's not true, okay.
And that is in the
I
rest
didn't
of
make
the
that up.
story. That's been
Okay.
told in the media.
Not true.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question.
The media lied?
Not true.
Joanne, what type of comments and did you get back from the losers, from the French wines? Did
Oh, well, you know,
Were they
Odette Kahn, one of the tasters was Odette Kahn. And I forgot to tell you that George Tabor worked for Time Magazine. And where did I put that? Time Magazine, and he didn't have any assignment that day. And so George Tabor was invited to the tasting, and he was the only press person that went. And he wrote an article called The Judgment of Paris. It was in Time Magazine on June 7th. And what was the rest of the question?
I said, how did the French wineries react to?
And he told us that that Odette Kahn, who was one of the tasters, and he also George Tabor also wrote a book called The Judgment of Paris, which is fantastic, but I'm sure the library has it. And what was that?
The question is, did you get feedback from the French wineries that hosted you after California won the two top?
Oh, yes, and one was Odette Kahn, who wanted her boat back. And Stephen said, no, I'm sorry, he would not give her the boat back. But the French didn't broadcast it at all. It was not in the French media,
Wow.
so.
Did some of the winemakers, well, you weren't with them because you came back, were they congratulatory to the other members of the group? Or were they they ignored the win, sort of?
Oh, you mean that were on the Cello Chip tour?
Well, I'm just thinking, how did the French wineries, did they congratulate you and your group for the win, or did they just ignore it?
We left the next day. They left the next day for the United States. Our tour, it was the last day of our tour. But I didn't hear any congratulations myself.
Here, I got it.
This is sort of a question. Just a couple of months ago, I had an old friend who's a winemaker over for dinner, and we were talking about this, and he said that the wine from Stag's Leap Wine Cellars that won was from a second leaf vineyard. A vineyard that was 2 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had you heard that before?
I think that's true. Yeah.
Well, that night we opened a 73. A third leaf bottle that we've had for a long time, and it was fabulous. It was so good.
You were very fortunate.
That's what we spent all our money on when we first got to Napa.
Thank you for sharing your story. I have a question. So my younger compatriots in the Napa Valley, the rumors are no one's drinking wine anymore. It's doom and gloom. Do you have any words of wisdom for the younger generation about how to get through this rough patch in the industry?
I really do. Start drinking wine.
More social.
I've got 3 bottles of Martha's Vineyard in 74, 76, and 77.